mercy. Ain't no mercy.
Dunkirk is directed by Christopher Nolan. It stars Tom Hardy, Chris Wolfhead, Kenneth Branagh, Cillian Murphy, Harry Styles, a whole bunch of people. And it's a story about 400 men who are trapped by the Germans. They're trying to get out of Dunkirk, and there's almost like no way to get out of the beaches. Civilians try to help as much as they can, and this movie tells a story about how these men were able to get out of those beaches alive. I was very interested to see this movie. For one, Christopher Nolan directed it. It had a whole bunch of people that I really like, and it's scored by Hans Zimmer, and I really like World War II movies, and I really like war films because it could really impact me emotionally, and that's what I like to see out of these films. Christopher Nolan blew me away again. I think this is probably one of his best films ever. I still think The Dark Knight is probably my favorite from his, but aside from that, this is a masterpiece of filmmaking. I actually think this is going to be contender against War for the Planet of the Apes as my favorite movie of the year, or with Logan. This movie was just that good. Let's talk about the cinematography and editing. Cinematography Beautiful. This is a good looking movie. It is dark, yes. It does have a lack of colors, yes. But it also makes it look more haunting. Like you really do not want to be in this place. You are really scared. Because the atmosphere that also helps just really feels haunting. You really feel like you're not sure whether these men are going to get out of the situation. And you don't know if anybody's going to get out of this situation. You also feel like you are there with the men. And the editing just is beautiful. Each scene has a good flow to it. And each scene cutting to another scene, it just has a good flow to it. I mean, it is slow, and to be honest, this is like Christopher Nolan's shortest films. It's like an hour and 40 something minutes long, but the movie feels longer than that, and I think the pacing is really, really good. Each scene had a real good pace to it. Not one scene dragged just a tiny bit. And I think that's all because of the great filmmaking that Christopher Nolan did. He is an expert at all this stuff, and I really like what he did with this film. One thing that I really noticed in this film is that there is an extreme lack of violence. I did not pay attention to the rating of this film, but since I now know it's PG-13, some people might get turned off because they think war films will have to be rated R to be more impactful. In this film, it is not the case. It is basically the horror of the situation. Being in the situation is what makes it scary. Not all the blood and gore, but the actual battle going on with these men trying to get out. And it's really terrifying to see that happen because you didn't know whether they're going to be stopped in their tracks from getting close to home. It is just a really neat way to show the horror of the war in your film while not relying on violence too much. It had probably one of my favorite aspects about this film is the lack of violence. Not to say violence is always necessary. Sometimes film need to show the actual violence to showcase the horror in the war. But in this film, I didn't think it really need to, and I'm also kind of glad it didn't. So, yeah, the violence being gone from the film even though there is quite a bit of violence, it's actually a breath of fresh air, and I think Christopher Nolan really did a good job with that aspect of the film in changing things up a bit. All the battle sequences in this film is also handled real well. I think this is some of the best World War II action sequences I have seen. The airplane fights with Tom Hardy are intense. And when the soldiers are trying to move across the little city or the little town, it is really intense. There are gunshots flying everywhere, shooting at these soldiers. I mean, you're just in the moment. The filmmaking and the way the camera moves around these men but you know what I'm talking about. But the way the camera moves around these men is really intense. And the music by Hans Zimmer really helps. There isn't as much score in this film as it is in many other Christopher Nolan films, but I really think the score is really good, and it really helps the scenes and the atmosphere feel more intense. But mostly this film relies on sound and silence, and rarely a lot of them do that. They think that music is the one thing that helps boost up the intensity of your scenes, but it's mostly the silence and noises that goes around the scenes that help also. And the lack of score could also really help. Sure, you can have score. I mean, the score worked here, but you could also rely on sound and silence. And I think that blending together in this film is great. I think Hans Zimmer did a great job on the score. I will be happy to get it, but I really like how there is an extreme lack of score and soundtrack in this film, that the horror relies on the silence and the noises of the situation. Overall, this is a really well-directed film and a really, really intense film. The characters are probably the weakest aspect of the film, but I really enjoyed the characters also, and they're just a tiny nitpick. It's just something that I had to find if I had to pinpoint a problem in the film, because no movie is perfect. Let's all be honest. But Christopher Nolan did it again. I really recommend you guys go see this next week or on Friday, whenever it comes out. And Dunkirk deserves an A+. Thank you guys so much for watching this review. Please leave a like, subscribe, comment, and I will see you guys next time.
The flame. I torture you. I'm a slave to your games.